At The Bunker, we want to engage in conversation with those that are all in the pursuit of their life's passion, in particular, in the intersection of sports, movies, TV, and tech. Today, we're fortunate to have as our guest a lifelong friend and a walking sports encyclopedia, Jorge Martín. We were competitors early on in elementary school, and we eventually became friends in high school at Alamany High School in the San Fernando Valley. And like most kids, we parted ways for college, and that's where Jorge began to forge his path as a sports journalist. For years and years after college, he worked in various industries, and in 2005, he earned his big break when he joined the Los Angeles Dodgers as Director, Publications. Jorge has now leveraged all of that professional and fanboy experience, pouring both of them all into his recently launched podcast, Familia FFB, with his cousins Hector Reyes and Ricky Torres. The three cousins debate and dissect any and everything fantasy football and NFL, making sure to absolutely blow away all of their competitors' picks while also reminiscing about growing up in a huge, tight-knit family. And even though Jorge is the founder of Familia FFB, on today's episode we'll primarily focus on the LA Dodgers' recent World Series win, Jorge's lifelong affiliation as not only a fan, but also as a member of the Dodgers organization as he worked alongside legendary Hall of Famers as well as current players that, in my humble opinion, are a lock for MLB's Hall of Fame. And then we'll go all in comparing this year's champions to our sentimental favorite Dodger teams from our childhood. Enjoy. Let's talk a little bit about your background, because even though we're going to have you back many more times to speak on FFB, I want to, since I'm an LA guy, you're an LA guy, there's something obviously magical happening in LA with regard to our sports scene.
Yes.
You know, the Lakers were able to pull it off in this short, kind of a funky season, but it still goes down as a chip. And then all of a sudden, these guys came about. And this young man right here
Walker
helped lead
Buehler.
the charge, along with our old school guy with Kershaw and Kenley, our old school guys. And these young cats that we have on the list, and the middle ground guys, Turner, of course, Bellinger and Seager, man. Seager came. He was huge.
Phenomenal.
He was huge. And not to mention, how lucky were we, or the Dodgers, to fall into a Mookie Betts, of all people. One of the baddest dudes, top 2, 3 in the league the last 4 or 5 years. And we get this guy. And all of a sudden, it's like, you guys better win. you better make sure you win.
It's so funny.
Bought a funky glove and was playing with my son in his Little League game. I don't know if you can see.
Beautiful.
I actually put that's my actual bat from Guardian Angel Little League game. That was the first Louisville Slugger my dad purchased for me way back in the day. And I hung it up on my wall in honor of the Dodgers coming through for the first time since Fernando and Hershiser were around. So anyway, man, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Dodgers. Tell us a little bit about your history. You have this massive history with the Dodgers. Not only were you a fan, you grew up in the shadows of the Dodgers over here in the San Fernando Valley like I did in Pacoima, California. And, you know, it's one of those things, man, where anytime I want to know something about the Dodgers, even though I'm a lifelong fan, I always want to drop something on you because I know you always add these little tidbits to me. And I'm like, all right, that's new. So give us a little bit of a history of your progression from being a fan to actually being employed with the Dodgers. And then we'll be fanboys for a second and talk about what happened this year.
Oh, man. Well, you know, first game I went to was 1975. My T-ball team went. Ironically, we were the Giants. And, you know, I really enjoyed the experience, but it didn't grasp me yet. And then for some reason, the spring of 1977, something grabbed hold of me. I was still 9. And I mean, I could not consume enough baseball. And it was Dodger baseball. Garvey, Lopes, Russell, Say, Don Sutton, Tommy John, Steve Yeager, Dusty Baker, I mean, Reggie Smith, Rick Monday. I mean, all of those guys, they became a part of the wallpaper of my home. I mean, my mom also, I think that's what's always been special about that. My mom fell in love with baseball the same time I did. We would sit and listen to the games when they weren't on TV, which when they were home, they were never on TV. And it just became just this special thing. And that team team was special. That team won the division going away. They won an incredible NLCS against the Phillies, against a great Phillies team.
Mike Schmidt.
Mike Schmidt, Larry Boa, Manny Trio. I mean, just all of these guys were just, fantastic ball players. Bob Boone, Steve Carlton. But, when they won, and then they went up against the dreaded Yankees, and Reggie Jackson tore my heart out. But you know what? And one of the things that I learned was that's when I knew it got, because it hurt. It hurt. Because it hurt, that's how I knew that it was special. And so I stayed on it. But because of that team, the 1977 team, I became a fan. I became a fan of all sports. I became a Ram fan. I became a Laker fan. And those sports, they gripped me. But there was something about baseball being my first love. I just kept going. The Dodgers went back to the World Series again in 1978, and the Yankees broke our heart again. But in 1981, Fernando Mania, which, being a child of Mexican parents, to have Fernando Mania, to have a Mexican kid, 20 years old, didn't know the English language, but that dude knew how to pitch. That showed me, you know what? You can do anything you want. And you don't have to feel limited by your background. Or Clyde, my mom, your dad, they worked at General Motors, blue collar jobs. Father worked in construction. It showed me that, hey, you know what? Go for it. I wanted to be a sports writer. Got to do it. Did it while I was in college. Became a staff writer at the LA Daily News. And next thing I was going on. And I kept at it, kept writing within my career path. I published publications for DirecTV. I did different type of communications in the health insurance industry. Sports was always there. And then in 2005, I found out about this position opening up. A friend of mine sent this to me, and he said, hey, I think this is you. And it was the publications director with the Dodgers. And I just thought, and I had a friend who was on the inside, the team historian for the Dodgers, Mark Langell. Hey, Mark. I called him up and I said, is this for real, or is this just one of those jobs that they've already got the candidate? He said, no, it's very much real. Somebody left recently and there's no inside candidate. I even asked him, you're not going for it? He goes, no, I'm very happy doing what I'm doing. I went for it. Wouldn't you know it? The kid from Pacoima got the gig. They wanted someone who spoke Spanish because they wanted someone to be able to connect with the Latino players. And next thing I know, I'm surrounded by my heroes. One of my first days there, I see Jaime Jarrín at a press conference, and I go and introduce myself. And we're now friends to this day. I met Fernando at a luncheon, and I told him about a game where I went to. Not only did he throw a shutout, but he also hit a triple with bases loaded. He gets a big smile on his face, and he says, that's the only triple I ever hit in my career. 17 years in the major leagues, and the only triple he hit in his career.
Really?
So we, and it was just, it just became such special 8 years of my life where all of my boyhood heroes came to life. It just became special. All the members of the infield, I met them, and proud to say, if I don't consider them a friend, I'm friendly with them. Dusty Baker, I've still got the picture that he sent me when I was 10 years old that he signed. I told him about that picture, and he just laughed, and he just said, it's so funny to hear people tell me that they were fans of me when they were kids, and now they've got kids. And so, but yeah, it just became such a special time because I was Peter Pan. I didn't have to grow up. I got to relive my youth and see so many of the players that I grew up watching, but I also got to see the new generation. People come up. I met Clayton Kershaw 2 months after his 18th birthday. He'd just gotten selected by the Dodgers right out of high school in Texas. They made it, I think it was the number 7 pick in the draft. I still remember him telling me how on the flight to LA, he popped in a video of Dodger history that someone had given him so that he could actually learn about it. And next thing you know, 2 years later, he's making Dodger history, and special person. You mentioned Kenley Jansen earlier. I knew him when he was a catcher.
Blows a lot of people away when they find that stat out.
Oh, it's phenomenal. It's 2008, and I was flying back east to go to spring training at Dodgertown in Vero Beach. This was going to be the last year that the Dodgers were training in Florida, and so in legendary Dodgertown, you either flew in to Orlando or you flew into Fort Lauderdale, and someone went to pick you up. I took a red eye and I flew. So first thing in the morning, I'm in Fort Lauderdale Airport. The driver comes by to pick me up, and you never knew if you were getting picked up with multiple people or just one. So, I see the guy and he goes, I thought, is there anybody else? No. And I said, great. And he goes, just when I'm thinking, we're going straight to Dodgertown, he said, but we do have one more stop. We got to go to Miami to go pick up a minor leaguer. And I thought, oh man, Miami is 1 hour away from Dodgertown.
Right.
So I thought, you know what? It's fine. All of a sudden I come up and I just see this mountain of a man, 20 years old. This guy's 6'5", 250. still got baby fat on his cheek.
Mm-hmm.
I reached out to shake his hand, and I thought his name was Kelly Johnson because he has a very thick accent. Nicest kid. He's got, he didn't have the dreadlocks that he has now. I mean, he just short haircut, just the biggest smile, and just chatted away. He's from Curacao, telling me how he was so happy that the Dodgers had just signed to Andrew Jones, who was an all-star with the Braves, didn't work out with the Dodgers, but he was so happy because he was a countryman. We're talking, and this was probably a 3-hour drive that we were going, and I'm sitting there thinking, and I finally figured out that his name was Ken Lee Jansen, and I sat there and I'm like, okay, well, I keep an eye on the minor league system of the Dodgers. Why have I not heard of this guy? All he kept telling me about was, last year I caught the best pitcher I ever caught. Have you heard of Clayton Kershaw? This was Clayton Kershaw in A-ball. So, his first full year in the minor leagues, I shake his hand, I wish him good luck, I told him to stay healthy, and I go back into the offices, and I thought, I got to figure out who this kid is. And I looked at his batting average, and I was like, oh, this is why I haven't heard about this kid. It was like 180, 212, 175. I'm like, this guy can't hit. I'm never going to see this guy again. Never going to see this guy again. Next thing I know, a year later, I found out that they switched him to pitcher, that they converted him. I just thought, oh, okay, that's interesting. Almost a year to the day after he was converted to pitching, he's in the major leagues. And of all things, in his second game, he saved a 1-0 victory for, guess who? Clayton Kershaw.
Clayton Kershaw. That's crazy.
So,
those two guys have to be lifted up there with all-time greats. I mean, I know people such as Koufax and Drysdale are legendary. Fernando, Sutton, Tommy John. Can never say that without the nasal Vin Scully thing. I think, especially now, those two, they have to be in that pantheon. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, Kershaw is just as accomplished as any pitcher not named Sandy Koufax. And you know what? Sandy Koufax has 3 Cy Young Awards. Kershaw has 3 Cy Young Awards. Koufax has 1 MVP. Kershaw's got 1 MVP. Where Mr. Koufax has him is he's got 4 World Series rings. Kershaw now has 1, but I mean, it's special. And the thing that I think is wonderful is the two of them have developed just a wonderful relationship, a friendship that spans generations. And there are things that Koufax has kind of shared with Kershaw that really only the two of them are going to experience. It's special to see them. It's funny, in 2013, the Dodgers had just beaten the Braves. And I remember seeing Koufax go up to Kershaw to give him a big hug. And I was just standing there, right next to them because I wanted to congratulate both of them. And next thing I know, somebody took a picture of that embrace. It was trending on the internet, on Twitter that night and all over the internet the next day. And people would be like, is this you in the background? I'm like, yes, that's me.
Yes,
I've got some champagne on my head, and it was wonderful.
Awesome.
But yeah, and so I got to do it, and it was wonderful because I got to share that so much with my family. I mean, I was so happy that you and your father came out for a game that day. It was a wonderful game.
Absolutely.
Matt Kemp hit a walk-off home run to win it on one of the hottest days of the year.
I remember that.
But
and we sat in the shade, which was great.
Oh, I was so happy that the shade was working out that day. Actually, yeah, it was great because I got when the game went to extra innings, I said, you know what, I'm not doing anything else for the rest of this game. So I'm hanging out with you guys and watching the game and enjoyed the hell out of it. But
I remember that day. That was a blast.
It was it was great. And doing that, it reminded me, the love of sports is always something that I've got to stay with me. I mean, the one thing that did elude me was being there for a World Series victory. We came close a couple times with making it far in the playoffs. Just didn't end up getting to the World Series. But I tell you, the memories that I made of that during those days, I think completely priceless. The friendships I made at that place are with me to this day, and it'll be there till the day I die, because there's certain bond that, and it from there's bonds that you have with people you played with, going back to grade school, that are special. This being a part of the Dodgers, being a part of something that was so much bigger than us, that is the civic treasure that people just love, and we got to be the voices for it. There's no greater voices than Vin Scully and Martín, but we got to help continue on certain traditions, and it was great for me to be able to tell so many people's stories through the publications that I was in charge of and created, and it was just a wonderful time in my life. I'm never going to forget. I'm glad my kids were able to be old enough to enjoy it. My twins were 6 years old when I left the organization. They got to experience certain things in that wonderful wonderful, wonderful time. Wonderful time.
You know, it's interesting, all those years you spent in the organization and even before as a fan. One thing I've noticed, especially with the pandemic, with everyone playing in these bubbles, I actually think that the product that was put on the field, at least from a television, watching it on television, that from that perspective, football translates quite easily. They've become, meaning the leagues and the television, the broadcasters have become adept at making sure that the right fan noise, types of sounds that we're accustomed to, the types of cheering, not just some big roar every single time, but if it's an interception and it's a home team and if it's a caught pass and if they run for this and if they're not the home team, it's seamless now. I don't even think about it. Basketball is the only one I think had to do something a little bit different because it's the only of the three major American sports. The fans are such, in a way, especially on television, the fans are kind of much more a bigger part of the product. They're right on top of them.
Exactly.
You have people sitting right there. If you're going for a ball out of bounds in basketball, you can run into someone and knock over their beer, which happens a lot. Can't do that in baseball, really. And football, you can't do it. That's not going to happen. But the video screens, I had just complete polar opposite reactions from people in basketball, the presentation of basketball, where they put the screens of people up there in the stands. I enjoyed it. Most people I know did not. They didn't think it translated at all. But I thought the level of play was pretty high. Baseball, to me, is going to do, I believe, very well. How old is Mookie Betts?
28.
The fact that you said 20, that guy's still in his 20s. I think what's happened with LeBron James and Tom Brady is going to bleed into other sports. Baseball, you tend to have more longevity anyway. But I think what's happening now in the presentation and the guys they have playing in baseball right now, I actually think they're going to get back to a heavy schedule. No matter what's happening in the country next year, I think these guys are going to get into a heavy schedule. It may not be 162 games. It may be 100 games. I think that, what do we do, 60 this time?
60, yes.
I thought the product was fantastic. And baseball makes the vast majority of its money from just they do game after game after game. I'm 162 per team times how many teams in the league?
30.
Most of them have some sort of regional television network dedicated to every single home game and most of the away games. So the amount of inventory that baseball accumulates every single year is tremendous. It makes for the wagering opportunities that are, I know Tennessee just came through a day or two ago. So many other dominoes are going to fall in the next year as far as the wagering space. When people put more money on it, FFB, when you guys talk about the fantasy football aspect, it makes for a much more in-tuned fan. And I think baseball is going to really benefit from that next year. That rookie for the Rays, every time he came up to bat, that was a problem. And this kid is what, 23?
23 or 24.
He's young. So he's going to be an absolute menace, more so than some of these big Yankees. I think this kid from the Rays is going to be special, like Mike Trout level. He has the potential, just feared, everywhere he goes. Mike Trout's not been on a winning team really, but he's feared every time he comes up. That guy is feared. This guy, what was his name? From the
Randy Arozarena. And the interesting thing is he didn't get called up to the major leagues until August.
Till the end, yes.
So it's just like he's in the major leagues for the first time in August, and a little more than a month later, he's tearing up the playoffs. I mean, just amazing. Just amazing. He had one of the most incredible Octobers I've ever seen.
A case could have been made for that guy to be the MVP.
Oh, very much.
So he was on the losing
World
team.
Series, he wins the MVP.
Yes.
Yeah.
If he was on the losing team, he was special.
Oh,
he was really, really good. So I'm looking at the health of our three primary sports. I think it's going to be incredible. I think the dipping the toe in the water of these bubble type situations, I actually think that was good for them to do. Football is going to be incredible. It's going to, I think, get bigger and bigger and bigger, whether fans are in the stadium or not, regardless if fans are in the stadiums or not. Because we're primarily, especially from a television perspective, we're primarily focused pretty close, and you rarely see fans unless they cut away to fans. Baseball, you somewhat see the fans when someone's at bat. That they'll work on that.
Right.
But these guys are trying to kill each other in baseball in a great way. They were really competing at a high level, and that's the number one thing. Football, you saw these two guys fighting in football the other day. So I ran up to the other guy. That's what I like. That to me lets me know that these guys are back in it. here. That to me, it's going to help the fans out a lot. It's going to keep people glued to the screen over the next several weeks to the end of the football season. So when baseball is ready to come back, regardless if fans are in the stands or not, I still think it's going to be a great product. They may only do 100 games. You have an Olympic year coming up too, so they may change things. I think the NBA is going to have the toughest time, to be honest, but the level of play at least is at a high level. So you named our 1978, 77, 78 team: Yeager, Garvey, Lopes, Russell, Say, Dusty Baker, Rick Monday, and Reggie Smith, and then our two studs on the mound, Sutton and Tommy John. I know they kind of hold a special place in your and my heart. How would you compare them, even though they didn't win, just talent-wise from 1 through 9 to just before we won the World Series? I guess we got to say that because those guys didn't win a World Series, but the Rays were not comparable to the Yankees of 77, 78 either. So no one was going to be, that was the Michael Jordan's Bulls, basically, that the Dodgers ran into.
Right.
And so no excuses, but it's very difficult for me to give these guys a leg up. I guess I'm just babbling because it's an emotional play more than an objective play. What do you think?
Well, the thing, as you were asking the question, I was kind of going through my head, position by position, who I would rank first.
Who would you replace? Right. I didn't even think of it from that perspective.
So, yes. I sit there and Garvey, as good as Max Muncy was, nobody's going to beat Garvey. I think Davey Lopes, you put him over either of the two guys that, Chris Taylor, Kike Hernandez, Gavin Lux, who played a little bit. Corey Seager is, Bill Russell, I love you, but Corey Seager is the guy. And, you got at third base, you got an older Justin Turner, against Ron Say in his prime. I'm giving it to Ron Say. I think Ron Say is the greatest third baseman in Dodger history, Brooklyn and LA. So that's saying something. To me, he's one of the most underrated great players of all time. Right there, you're going through position by position. That's 3 out of 4. You're giving it the late 70s Dodgers. Behind the plate, Will Smith, Austin Barnes, you give it to them over Steve Yeager. Much as I love Yeager, incredible behind the plate, struck out a lot. He hit for some power, but just that was really it. You get to the outfield, you got A.J. Pollock and Jock Peterson in left field. I think you still give it to Dusty. Center field, you give it to Bellinger over Rick Monday. Mo, I love you too, but I think
love Reggie Smith.
I love Reggie Smith,
no
but
way.
Mookie Betts
Yes.
could, by the time he's done, he could go down as the greatest Dodger, if not the greatest Dodger ever, at least the greatest right fielder in Dodger history, maybe even the greatest outfielder in Dodger history. And you're talking Duke Snider, you're talking about Tommy Davis, you're talking about Raul Mondesi, you're talking about Baker, you're talking about Smith. I mean, just some phenomenal players. But Mookie Betts, I think, plays a game. He's playing a different game than everybody else. He's chess, everybody else is checkers. He's thinking the game ahead of the pitcher. He's instinctually being able to, the play he made in game 6, where he basically, the player, I forget who it was, hit a ground ball to first base and he was gone on contact. He barely slides in, beats the throw. That's a combination of brains and blinding speed that you may only have in 5 guys in the major leagues. One of the other guys being Mike Trout. There's nothing that on the baseball field. Now, when you look at him, he's 5'9", 180 pounds. And he does not look like, when he's wearing something baggy, he looks like just like a skinny kid who's just out of high school. He's so incredibly skilled, and there's literally no weakness to him. He doesn't strike out very much. A lot of times he walks more than he strikes out, which is a true measure of a player's great. And, but yeah, just utterly phenomenal ball player. So you give it to him. You get to the pitching staff, the Dodgers beyond the top 2, you had Bert Hooton, who was a phenomenal number 3 starter, an all-star in his own right, MVP in the league championship series in 1981. Wonderful player for a long time, but there was no depth of 5 starters that could go. I mean, you got Kershaw and Buehler 1 and 2, and you got some incredible talent with Dustin May, Julio Urias, who is, to me, he was the guy that people weren't really talking about. And, he closed out game 7 of the NLCS. He closed out the World Series, got the last out. How many guys, think about this, 7 guys in Major League history, in Dodger history, got the last out of a World Series. One of them did it twice, Koufax. And Julio Urias is one of them.
Wow.
And actually, the incredible thing is when I sit and I think about it, I believe 6 of the 7 were by left-handed pitchers.
Nice.
Koufax did it twice. Johnny Padres did it once. Steve Howe did it one time, and Julio Urias. Oh no, 5 of the 7 times because one of the times was Hershiser. So 5 of the 7 were, and I believe 1959 was Larry Sherry. But just think about that. But yeah, Julio Urias, 24 years old, kid from Mexico, got signed 16 years old. I mean, he gets the last out, and he's walking around with the flag of Mexico on his back. And, to me, being a Mexican kid, loving Fernando, there was the great pride of seeing Victor Gonzalez, who was the winning pitcher of the last game of the World Series, struck out the side, I believe it was in the 6th inning. So you had the winning pitcher and the pitcher closing out the game, both from Mexico. And,
Wow.
just incredible. So I think quite honestly, this Dodger team has a deeper pitching staff than that team, where that team has a little bit of advantage. They didn't strike out nearly as much as this team does, which to me, I think is very, very important. Steve Garvey in his heyday rarely struck out 100 times. I think the only guy who struck out more than 100 times was Say, but he walked a lot. So I'd love to see that. But honestly, at this group is one of the greatest combinations of one of the greatest, deepest teams I've ever seen, Dodgers or anywhere else. So I'd probably give a slight edge to this team. And you know how much it hurts my heart to put anybody over the 77, 78 Dodgers.
Same here. Your breakdown was fantastic, though. I mean, everything that you were pulling out, I can try to be objective. Try because obviously the 77, it's very difficult. I mean, we actually went to the games, got to meet some of the players. You're a kid, very impressionable. Got to meet Garvey, Say, Lopes, Baker, Dusty Baker. I met him a few times. And Reggie Smith at the time was my favorite player. That was my guy back then as I was pulling for them. But you're right. Even though he was my favorite Dodger then, obviously your tastes grow quite a bit as you grow. And this whole thing with Mookie, being able to say Mookie is better, that's an easy one to me. But I will say, it's still a business. Sports is a business. So what's going to happen over the next couple of years? Do you know anything about contractually who may be coming to an end, who might have to leave us, who we may have to negotiate? We have to keep Mookie with that fat contract now. Who's going to,
Oh yeah.
no matter how great you are, no one's going to, the reason why, Boston had to let him go is they couldn't necessarily afford the guy. So what do you think is going to happen in the near term, say the next 2 seasons, as far as who we're able to keep, who may possibly have to move on?
Well, the incredible thing about this team is it's a lot of these guys are under contract for a long time because they're young. Bellinger, Seager, Will Smith, they're all under contract. Obviously, Mookie's under contract until you and I are going to be collecting Social Security. So that's a long time, a dozen years. But no, you look at that pitching staff. Walker Buehler is only, I think, in his 3rd year. So he's got 3 more years before he reaches free agency. Dustin May, he was basically a rookie. Tony Gonsolin, a rookie. Julio Urias only in his 3rd year. So these guys have staying power. Clayton Kershaw, I believe, has 1 more year on his contract beyond this. He might have 2. I think he has 2 years. Kenley Jansen has 1 more year. The fans are kind of questioning whether they want to see him close anymore, which kind of breaks my heart. But it's meritocracy. You gotta, it's all about results. And if you're not getting the wins, it's
they need to back off on that one. So he's going to be okay.
But the guys that are free agents this year are Justin Turner, Kike Hernandez, and Jock Peterson. So they're free agents. I think some of the relief pitchers are free agents. Blake Trinan being one of them, who pitched so well during October. But again, when it comes to the bullpen, there's always so much turnover in the bullpen. When you get someone with sustained success like Kenley Jansen, it's borderline a miracle. But honestly, I mean, they're set up for a great repeat because they've got the young pitching staff that's really built up, and you got a great 1-2 punch in Kershaw and Buehler. And you look at that lineup, I think the only guy who's going to be 30 years old next year is Muncy. Oh, Pollock is another guy. I think he's going to be going into his 3rd year with the Dodgers. But really, and it depends on if they bring back Justin Turner, because if they don't, they've got a couple of young guys coming up behind him. Edwin Rios hit a bunch of home runs this year. He could play 3rd base. Max Muncy can move to 3rd base. Somebody else can play first. Bellinger could move back to first base. So it's just an incredible collection of talent. There's more coming. There's another young stud catcher, Keibert Ruiz, which I don't know how you're going to make room for him, because last I checked, you could only have 1 catcher at a time. But yeah, you just look at these guys. They got more pitching coming, and one of the top-rated prospects in in all of baseball, Gavin Lux, got a lefty with a beautiful swing. He came up as a shortstop, but they're moving him to second. He might be your starting second baseman next year and, be one of the top young players in the game. And so that's the thing. That's where you get sustained success in baseball, is just kind of having those young guys coming up right behind. That's where it's kind of like a little bit like the NFL is very much the same way. The NFL churns out young guys all the time. From guys after they get a certain age, they go out. The NBA is different in that, they get the young guys, and it's like when they're 18, 19 years old, they just graduate, they're a year out of high school and they declare after their first year. You kind of draft them and you grow them for a few years. That's how you either get someone like Giannis or you don't, and you end up picking somebody else and try and start over the process all over again.
I think they're going to have, out of the three primary leagues, I think the NBA is going to be in for the longest haul of making sure that the college divisions and the D League and things of that nature. I think they're going to have the toughest time in growing talent. Baseball's built for this with the farm system, and football, they have the best by far because of college. The college football system is very healthy. I mean, if I were to put all the sport, I actually would shove college football in there. It does earn more money, probably. I think it's around second behind the NFL only. It's massive. The rivalries in college football, 100 plus years, and there are at least over a dozen that have outgrown their original geographic area. Other people care about it. It doesn't matter if it's Texas versus Oklahoma, Red River. No. People on the East Coast will want to see that typically. People on the West Coast will want to see it. SC, UCLA. Mm-hmm. It's primarily just in college football. So they have by far the most interesting farm system, if you will. Baseball just has a great farm system compared to third place basketball. Basketball, these guys, like you were saying, these guys have been coming up so early. And I don't care how good you are at the high school level. Basketball is different. It's just like the NFL not allowing someone, even if you're 300 pounds, if you're 18 years old, you're not going to go against a 280-pound guy that's 25 years old. He'd take your head off. In football, you can't do it. It doesn't translate. For the most part, in basketball, unless you're Giannis, the same thing can happen. I don't care how talented. The Ball kids, great. They're extremely talented. I love watching Lonzo Ball play. I thought he was incredible. Yeah. But I knew, even watching him at UCLA, I was like, oh, man, he's going to have to gain a good 20 pounds of muscle while trying to maintain that speed and ball handling, because even guys that are much shorter at the NBA level, like a Chris Paul, these guys are built like brick, what. And those young guys around, and they're fast and they're just tough. And so NBA, I see more players flash out by the time they're 23, 24 years old that come in early. Giannis, for the most part, he's very similar to what a lot of my coaches have always said in basketball. So you can't teach height. So not that it takes away from his talent or his hard work, his work ethic or anything of that nature, but there is something that helps tremendously when you're 6'10", 6'11", and you can move like a 6'1" guy. A 6'1" guy only has that he's 6'1". So you better be really special, or Chris Paul is going to eat your lunch every day. A Steph Curry is going to eat your lunch every day. Or LeBron's bringing the ball at point. You have no shot.
Oh my God, yeah.
So basketball is a little bit different animal. It's going to be interesting to see if they can pick themselves back up. The ratings, for many different reasons, they have to change course, or they'll just be happy with getting what they get right now. But I think the potential health of baseball and football right now are just massive. I think they're going to grow at a much faster rate. I'm hoping that the NBA grows back at as fast a rate as those two, but I just see a couple of obstacles in the way in the coming years, unfortunately.
Well, the thing with the NBA, I think the NBA got hurt the most by the way this pandemic kind of shook up their season, is that they were only about a month away from, ending their season and starting the playoffs. And so where they were really hurt is having to play their biggest games, the NBA finals, in October. And you're already up against football. You're up against Major League Baseball. It was overload at that point. I mean, the Lakers championship game went up against Sunday Night Football, which is the highest rated program, even higher than Monday Night. And it's tough. I mean, I watched that one and then went over to the Sunday Night Football game. And also what hurt.
Only because you're a Laker fan.
And because I'm a Laker fan. And you know what?
Right.
And the fourth quarter, I actually had to go pick up my daughter, but I didn't care because the Lakers were up by a whole bunch of points. It was already over. But the thing is, I honestly think if the NBA could have actually restarted in the bubble and done it so that they're playing their finals in August and not in October, I think they would have made amazing ratings, not having to compete with the NFL. I really really think that October was sports overload. I mean, I had, the back-to-back Sunday nights. I had the Dodgers in Game 7, one game, and then a week later they're in Game 7 of the NLCS, and then a week later they're in Game 5 of the World Series, and they're both games are going up against Sunday Night Football. I got like one game on an iPad, and I got like the football game on an iPad. I got the Dodger game on the, and I'm just trying to. Trying to watch both. I would have loved to see the NBA do this and, do it in August. You never know. But I do love the fact that the NBA is going to restart its season and in December. And I've heard that they're going to play through July. And I think they're going to make, as long as they can get fans in fairly soon during that, I think they're going to make up a lot. And I think they will do amazing ratings in July, when really it's only baseball that they're competing against. They're not competing against the NFL yet.
Well, I think also, we don't have to dive too deep into it. I do think the political piece did have an adverse effect as well. I think there'll be more time behind that, so that will kind of fade. They've already mentioned, Adam Silver has stated that he's going to remove most of that. Players can say what they want in their own time, as they should. Anyone can go and do whatever they want to do, but as far as putting the product on screen, I know for a fact that it did turn a lot of fans off. Football has been pretty good about being a little bit more, because they've always been much more corporate, just in their presentation. That's okay. Baseball, for the most part, kept it very tight as well. I think the NBA, when they stated, I think it was last week, Adam Silver came out and stated that more than likely we're going to begin on Christmas Day. I actually think that's pretty good. I think it would do right by them because this is an Olympic year. I think this Olympics is going to be huge. I think there are going to be so many storylines. Storylines drive everything, right? In every sport. I think the storylines of who didn't make the cut, it's just a year too late in all countries around the world. I think there are going to be so many stories like that. Plus, who was able to now make it as a result of giving an extra year to train, heal, playing sports, any kind at that level is very taxing. That's the one thing people don't realize. These people are uber humans. These athletes today, compared to when you and I came up, we love the guys that we grew up watching, but they're physically no match for these guys today. It's not even close. No. It's not even close.
I mean, every generation, the training and the way they diet and they take care of themselves and the way they take care of their bodies, it just keeps improving that much more. And yeah, it's such a phenomenal thing.
It's interesting on that note. I've always said, not to cut you off, man, but people give Brady and LeBron so much credit, as they should, as far as taking care of themselves and basically blazing a path for those behind them to say, hey, if you really want some longevity in the sport that we love, this is how you do it. People always, and this guy, he happens to be a former Laker, never gets enough credit in just about anything this guy does. There's never been, in my opinion, a 7-footer that played at such a high level like Kareem. And there was a reason for that. Kareem, before LeBron, before Brady, this guy was taking care of his body in a way that everyone else was looking at him. And, guys from back then, they were still smoking in the locker room and carrying on about things. Kareem was Mr. Zen, so he was all about, and the fact that he was 7'2", playing with Chucks. He wore Chucks back then for the most part.
Yeah.
For the majority of his career. This guy, you see him today, there's nothing too crazy that I've seen from him today. What is he in his 70s now? Where he has that, that weird 7-footer. I'm hurting in every single joint that you see of a lot of players today. I saw Wilt quite a bit the last 5 years of his life, and he was physically not well. Had quite a few conversations with him, but he had the forever bends on certain parts. But when you're that big and you're playing with what we know now was just subpar by today's standards, obvious, their bodies had to be beat up. But Kareem lasted, 21, 22 years?
Something like that, yeah.
And he could still score every now and then when he felt like it, or when it called for it, 20 points a game, and that was at the end. And so he doesn't get enough credit, just like he doesn't get enough credit as he should be in the conversation of when they say the greatest basketball player ever. I personally think Kareem's the greatest basketball player of all time because he won at all levels. Michael Jordan is by far the best professional basketball player of all time. That's my opinion. LeBron, of course, is going to be up there, but Kareem gets zero credit. Zero.
I think, the crazy thing is, I think part of it is when the NBA really started to reach its zenith in the 80s, he was still great, but he was not, the flashy player. It was Magic running the break. If the break slowed down, then it's like, okay, wait for the big fella. And it's like, okay, throw it into Kareem, swing left, shoot right. The the sky hook. I only remember seeing that get blocked one time, and that was by Ralph Sampson, who was taller than him. So one of the few people who was taller than him. But
15 younger, taller.
Oh yeah. But I mean, I look at Kareem. I mean, he was so graceful. I mean, and you know what? He was one of the players who really did yoga. And you know, you talked about, you know, taking
martial
care of yourself.
arts, yoga,
Yeah.
all that stuff.
And I think it was funny. I don't know if you saw the 30 for 30 that ESPN did on Bruce Lee. And yeah, they did that over the summer. It was about a month or two after The Last Dance came out, and it was phenomenal. Kareem was all over it because he studied under Bruce Lee, and he talked about that. And
Game of Death, still one of my favorite Bruce movies.
Yeah, and what it did
Kareem
for
put
him.
that size 20 in his middle of Bruce Lee's chest. Pow, sitting down.
But it was
great.
something that made, you know, that was part of what made him great, the way he took care of himself, the way he took care of the whole body and the mind. And
was he a vegetarian?
I believe he was. Or if
I think
not,
he was I don't think he was like the Bill Walton type of vegetarian, because my dad used to complain about it all. He loved Bill Walton because he came from UCLA. My dad used to say, well, if that boy would eat some meat, he would break his bones all the time, you know? So, you know, Bill Walton evidently was hurt quite a bit.
God,
Kareem rarely was hurt. That boy doesn't eat meat, so that's why he's all. And I'm like, well, I don't think Kareem eats meat. And he'd give me a look, and I just let it go.
You know what? I'm pretty sure he does. He is a vegetarian. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of stuff has come out about eating, you know, more plant-based. And actually, one of these days, my wife and I may do a podcast on that, because we're at home, we're completely plant-based, and I really thought I was going to miss it, but food tastes good no matter what. And you know, occasionally dabble in it when it's outside, when we're outside, either at family get-togethers or places where you just, you know, there's no other options. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great stuff out there. Yeah, Netflix put together this movie called Game Changers, you know, talking about plant-based eating, and it was really eye-opening how some of these world-class athletes who don't eat any meat. And I mean, one of the biggest guys I saw, a world champion powerlifter, I think he had a shirt that was like, you know, powered by plants or something like that, and they showed him like moving 1,000 pounds or something like that, and like walking with it for like 60 feet and set a world record. And it was just like, oh my God, this is amazing. But yeah, that's for another podcast.
But I want to thank you for taking the time to sit with us today at the bunker. Everyone go out and support Jorge, Hector, and Ricky. These guys are not only extremely entertaining, but man, do they dive deep into all things football. And we're talking about American football here, for those of you that want to play that little silly game. The real football, in my opinion. I like soccer. I love football.
Yeah, Latinos love American football too. And
that's right.
And Clyde, I just, you know, I'm giving you a shout out right now. You've been a friend for more than, you know, almost 40 years now. And, you know, we practically grew up together. But honestly, you know, folks, keep following the bunker. I mean, this is going to be fun stuff. Clyde's going to keep everything fresh, get deep dives, but he's going to be something that I can't wait. I'm already a big Clyde fan, and I'm going to be a big bunker fan on top of it too. It's going to be
fun. Hey to everybody out there that we know. We'll talk with all of you soon. Take care.
Take care. Adios.
Adios, my man.